The albatross, celebrated in verse and revered by mariners. But according to the experts, most species of these ocean wanderers are in danger of extinction. It's claimed 100,000 are needlessly killed every year. One man, a future king, has taken up their cause, determined to halt their destruction.
What we're doing to the albatross is just a mere symbol of the appalling horrors that are going on, out of sight and out of mind.
Barcelona, Spain.
Cheers, mate.
Every 4 years, the fastest ocean-going yachts compete in the ultimate sailing race around the world.
3 cheers for Premier Challenge! Hip hip! Hooray! Hip hip! Hooray! Hip hip! Hooray!
They'll travel nearly 60,000 kilometers, circumnavigating the globe. They'll follow the route of the multi-masted clipper ships of old, through the roaring 40s in the Southern Ocean, riding 30-meter waves and driven by wind speeds of 110 kilometers an hour. They're off. These crewmen are likely to encounter far fewer albatrosses than any of their predecessors. That's why they've taken up the cause in a race to save the albatross. The Crozet Islands are at latitude 46 in the southern Indian Ocean, closer to Antarctica than southern Africa. They're a haven for the most spectacular species, the wandering albatross, with its 3.5-meter wingspan. Although Henri Weimerskirch lives in France, he spent years in the southern Indian Ocean studying albatrosses here on the Crozet Islands.
These birds are oceanic birds. They spend about 95% of their life at sea. They are in the open ocean foraging for food. During a single breeding season, they would cover between 100,000 and 150,000 kilometers. So this means during their life, because they spend their whole life at sea, they cover millions of kilometers.
Anyone who travels through the roaring 40s soon meets the wandering albatross.
I just remember in the Navy when I was serving back in the 70s and the long journeys I did in the ships I served in, how often we'd see the albatross ceaselessly, going round and round the ship or just following in our wake. And I remember, again with fascination, watching these marvellous birds and just imagining how far they were travelling. The fact they were always there every morning was the thing that I could never get over.
Ben Sullivan of BirdLife International has amassed the data describing the fate of the albatrosses.
There are 21 species of albatross in the world, and 19 of those are classified as being under threat of extinction under the IUCN Red List. To give you a few examples, the wandering albatross population in South Georgia. In the mid-1960s there were around 2,000 breeding pairs, and last year for the first time that population went down below 900 breeding pairs. The black-browed albatross in South Georgia and Tristan are declining at between 4 to 5% a year. So there are many of these species that are declining at a rate that's clearly unsustainable.
But how do these experts know the birds are in decline?
For many of these populations, there are actually sort of cyclical monitoring programs. So there are censuses conducted every 3, 4 or 5 year period. So you have your baseline data, and then obviously you can calculate the rate of decline between those census periods. So there can be several years time lag before some of these declines are detected.
It's not just around the Crozet Islands that detailed studies have documented the decline of the albatross. Here in the Falkland Islands, where the black-browed albatross breeds, they've noticed a similar decline.
In the last decade, the rate of decline for the black-browed albatross in the Falkland Islands is about 1% per year. This actually equates to just under 8,000 birds a year, which is more or less 20 killed every day.
Among the first to think there might be something amiss with the albatrosses was Henri Weimerskirch.
We have first documented the fact that some population, like wandering albatrosses, were decreasing. So we had no idea at all why the population was decreasing at this time. So this was in the 80s. So we were the first to use satellite tracking to track wandering albatrosses, and we found that in fact, especially female, were going during breeding very far from the breeding island. They were going up to 2,000 kilometers in subtropical waters. The next step was in fact that an observer, mainly one scientist from Australia, Nigel Brothers, went on, he knew that the population on crozet were declining, and he went on long line fishing boat in the Indian Ocean, and they found that in fact there was a large number of birds that were killed, including wandering albatrosses.
Longline fishing boats scour the ocean in search of highly prized fish like tuna and swordfish. They fish with lines up to 120 kilometers long, baited with thousands of hooks. But they aren't just catching tuna. They're catching albatrosses.
The albatross are attracted to longline fishing vessels because they process the fish on board and they discharge a lot of waste, and so basically the birds are attracted to the vessel to get food. When they're at the vessel, they're also present when the lines are actually set. So a long line can contain several thousand baited hooks. And when these hooks first leave the vessel, they're on the surface of the water or near the surface of the water. And that's when these birds actually dive to grab the hook. The hook becomes embedded in their beak and they get dragged underwater and drown.
More recently, longline fishing boats have moved into the Southern Ocean to catch the oddly named but highly prized Patagonian toothfish. As the boats moved closer to the Crozet Islands in the 1990s, Henri noticed the impact on the albatrosses.
At the beginning, when we found this problem, there was no longline fishing around the island. In the early 90s, in fact, the longline fishery for Patagonian toothfish started at this time. Indeed, when the Patagonian toothfish fishery started around South Georgia, around Kerguelen, around Crozet, Marion Island, the mortality of albatrosses was very high.
Albatrosses, like humans, live a long life. They breed only every couple of years and raise just one chick at a time. That slows population growth.
They live, for example, on the Crozet Island. We have birds that are still alive that have been banded in 1960. So this means that they are at least 55 years old. And so, because they are long-lived, they start to breed very late. This means that the average age at first breeding for an albatross is about 10 years old. And it will take about 1 year for the adults to rear the chick. And this is the main problem with longline fishing, is that this fishery is killing adult birds, which is an important part of the population.
In the poem The Ancient Mariner, the main character, a sailor, shoots an albatross and brings disaster to his ship. Today, those fighting to save the albatross feel that British poet Samuel Taylor Coleridge's poem has a global resonance.
I feel that, it should be our duty as human beings to ensure that we don't lose any species if we possibly can help it. But I think in particular with the albatross, it's so, again, symbolic, I think, of the way in which we treat our world and the way we treat our oceans and the way we exploit the fish stocks in particular. It would be such an appalling commentary on the way we treat the world. It really would be, I think. And to call ourselves civilized, if we allow that to happen, would be a total misnomer, I think.
And I had done an hellish thing, and it would work 'em woe. For all averred, I had killed the bird that made the breeze to blow. Central to Coleridge's poem is the death of the albatross, and in part 2 we look at ways it can be protected.